Earlier this month, the New York Post reported that the mayor of New York is giving away prepaid cash cards, each carrying up to 10 grand, and they're just giving them to foreign nationals in New York. It's insane. It is insane, but true. It's essentially socialism on steroids. America First reports that the great replacement is welfare for illegal aliens, ensuring a border invasion will continue. I mean, if you're incentivizing these illegals to come and get their healthcare paid, maybe get some free education while they're at it, and certainly it's a 10 grand card from New York. I mean, why wouldn't they come? Of course. They're incentivized to invade. Yet Biden is asking for help with the border issue. From NBC News, it comes with a hefty price. This is what the article says. It says, in a press conference Friday, Lopez Obrador called the U.S. to approve a plan that would deploy $20 billion to Latin American and Caribbean countries, suspend the U.S. blockade of Cuba, remove all sanctions against Venezuela, and grant at least 10 million Hispanics living in the U.S. the right to remain and work legally. Again, that's from the NBC News article. Here to discuss this and more is Raina Zeidelman, historian, sociologist, and multiple best-selling author. He's published 28 books. Man, I can't even get my first book out. And his books have been translated into more than 30 languages. Raina Zeidelman is Germany's capitalism superstar philosopher. So welcome to The Counter Narrative. It is such an honor to have you joining me today.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I do want to talk about your book, How Nations Escape Poverty, Vietnam, Poland, and Origins of Prosperity. But first, I wanted to just ask you, what is your perception of what's going on in America right now? You have illegals incentivized to pour in. I mean, what is going on? What's your take on that?
Yes, of course. This is absolutely crazy. This combination of a huge welfare state on the one hand and open borders on the other hand, this is the craziest thing that you can do. And we have it here in Germany. We know it in Europe. Angela Merkel, she invited also millions and millions of migrants from Africa and Arab states. And now we have all these problems because we have this welfare state and they get paid, they get money. And I can understand everyone who's living in a poor country. And if I would hear about a country where there's an open border and then I get money for free, it's a welfare state, of course, I can understand these people that they want to come there, but this combination doesn't work.
It is insane how our President Biden, stands up there and says he's been saying he can't do anything about it, that it's a Republicans' fault because they haven't empowered him. I mean, he's just lied and then ignores that all of these incentives have come with it. Now, apparently, like NBC, that news article makes it seem like he's trying to make a deal. But what do you think of that price tag, the cost of the counter deal, if you will?
I think it's only because the far left in the Democratic Party today is so strong that he doesn't rule the party in a way. He has to do what they tell them. And this is what they want. They want open borders and they want a kind of socialism. Of course, they don't call it socialism. Some like Bernie Sanders, he speaks about socialism, but there are a lot of others, maybe they don't use the word socialism, but this is exactly what they are doing. If you look, for example, what they've done in Europe, but I think also now in the United States, to forbid combustion engines and to force everyone to buy only electric vehicles. This is also such a socialist idea. Now, what's the real difference between capitalism on the one hand and planned economy on the other hand? Capitalism is a kind of democracy in the economy. That means entrepreneurs decide what to produce, and in the end, it's consumers' choice. We decide everything, what we buy, every day, what we buy and what not. But in a planned economy, politicians and government officials, they decide what kind of heater you should buy, what kind of car you should buy. And this book that you showed me there, it's How Nations Escape Poverty. And this is another point. No, this is a big lie from socialism, that you can only escape poverty with redistribution. No, this is not true. The only way to escape poverty is capitalism, is entrepreneurship and free market economy. And I show this with the examples of two countries. One of the countries is Vietnam. And, you know, in Vietnam, they had this war where almost everything was destroyed. But what was not destroyed by the war was destroyed by the socialist planned economy that they implanted after winning the war. And in the 90s, Vietnam was the poorest country in the world, poorer than all African countries. But they are smart people. What they did then, they understood that this planned economy doesn't work, and they started free market reforms. They introduced private property, more capitalism. They call themselves socialists today. But I can guarantee you one thing: it's easier to find a Marxist in an American university than in a university in Vietnam. I have lectures in universities in the United States and all over the world, and in Vietnam. And in Vietnam, they know that Marxism doesn't work. And so they implemented more capitalism. And, you know, the result is, in the 90s, 80% of the population in Vietnam lived in poverty. 80%. Today, it's 5%. This is one example. The other example in my book is Poland. Poland was, in the 80s, one of the poorest countries in Europe. An average Pole earned $50 the month, only $50. This was 10% what we earned here in West Germany at this time. And then in 1990, they started with free market reforms. There was a great reformer, his name is Balcerowicz. And today it's Europe's growth champion, Poland. Standard of living increased. It's amazing. And by the way, I heard you mentioned Javier Milei from Argentina before. And the man who did this economic reforms in Poland, he was also professor for economy as Javier Milei. He believed in the same philosophy. And I'm proud because I can show you another book, this book, The Power of Capitalism. This is one of Javier Milei's favorite books. He mentioned it in the interview. And so I'm very proud. And you see, these are the ideas that work everywhere in the world. And I hope they will work also in Argentina. But to come back to the United States, the problem is, according to the Index of Economic Freedom, the United States lost so much economic freedom. They started with the Index of Economic Freedom from the Heritage Foundation in 1995. And since then, the United States lost 6 points. And in the same time, Vietnam gained 20 points and Poland gained 19 points. So you see, it goes in the wrong direction in Europe and in the United States. And the problem is, according to this Index of Economic Freedom, there are today even 16 countries in Europe that are more economically free than the United States. 16 countries in Europe, and that doesn't mean that things go well here in Europe. On the contrary, we also go in this direction of a planned economy. And so, you know, I love America because I know what made America great in the past was entrepreneurship and capitalism. And you see it now. We had the first private moon landing yesterday from a capitalist company. This is great, and it's still working. But a lot of people forget what made America so successful.
Capitalism. But so to that end, what is it? How are progressives particularly able to push this lie that socialism is the way to go, that socialism is the more compassionate approach? I mean, we've just been giving examples of countries and leaders that are instituting capitalist approaches, and the proof is in the pudding, if you will. I mean, what proof do they have, like that socialism can work? Or, I mean, is there any socialism success story that I am not privy to?
No.
How can they keep this lie going?
No, you're absolutely right. They tried it in the last 100 years more than 24 times, and they failed all time without any exception. There's not a single example where socialism was successful and improved living conditions of poor people. And what is their trick? Their trick is every time when socialist experiment failed, they tell you, oh, sorry, this wasn't true socialism. Next time it will work. I will tell you another story. I have it in the last chapter of my book. This is Venezuela. Venezuela was, in the 70s, one of the 20 richest countries in the world. And then they started with crazy things, as you do today in the United States and as we do in Europe. Regulation, more government, big government, and situation become worse. And then they made a big mistake, people in Venezuela. They voted for Hugo Chavez, for the socialists. And all these intellectuals, left-wing intellectuals at universities, they were so enthusiastic about Hugo Chavez. They called it the socialism in 21st century. But what happened then? They had an inflation rate of 1,000,000% per year, 1,000,000%. Then people became so poor. Today, 77.5 million people fled from Venezuela. This is 25% of their population. They fled to other countries, to Chile and wherever. And when you confront the socialists now, here, what is with the socialism of the 21st century? And what's that? Oh, no, sorry, it wasn't true socialism. And this is what they tell you all times. They have no examples. You know, I'm an historian. And if I'm in my books, I write about real world examples from history, things that happened. What they write about utopia, about their vision. When you ask them, but how should it work and where is it? They show you a book. Look in the book. But this is the same as if I would compare your marriage, for example, with a romantic love novel. And maybe you would say your husband, look, our marriage is bad because it's not like it is in this love novel with its perfect love. You know, it's not fair. You can only compare reality with reality. For example, as I did in my book, you can compare Vietnam and Poland in socialist times, and then what happened after they had their free market reforms. But what they do, what the socialists do, they have their vision, their utopia, and then they compare it with what they call capitalism.
Yeah, that's such a great point. You know, you have to compare reality with reality, not reality to a what if or a best case scenario. I mean, it's so ridiculous. I wanted to save this, something I saw today to talk to you about, you know, because I think it's closely related. Here in America, we seem to be obsessed with race now, pitting the races against each other. And now there's all these diversity, equity, inclusion agendas. And it was being shared on socials that Microsoft's official 2023 diversity and inclusion report, they are admitting that they are paying white people less than other ethnic groups in the name of pay equity. I felt like this was related to the topic. What do you make of companies doing that? I mean, I don't even think that's legal, because then that's prejudice against race. It's just the other way around, I guess. But what do you think of that? I mean, is there a positive angle to that, or what do you make of it?
No, this is a. I know, you know what Martin Luther King he fought for, that all people should be equal, and not that to pay white people less than other people. And of course, this is a kind of discrimination, and they have the same at universities in the United States. You know this, they have this discrimination against Asian people, for example. If you are white, you have to test, maybe you have to have 100 points. When you are black, maybe only 80 points. And when you are Asian, you have 130 points. No, I think this is the big idea, you know, the great idea of capitalism, that everyone should be equal, but not equal in the result, but equal, you know, in front of the law. Yes, and the results will never be equal. And this is a absolutely crazy idea, and I can't understand why there are not more lawsuits against this kind of thing. I would go to the court if I do the same thing than someone else, and only because of the color of my skin, I get less money. This is what happened maybe 100 years ago, what they did with black people, and now their philosophy is to turn it around.
What about the argument that, well, their starting point is back, but like they're disadvantaged, so this is to try and even out the score? I mean, that's the argument that is always put out there,
Okay.
that we need these programs instead of merit, I guess.
If you start thinking this way, we are all not equal in a way. For example, what would you say? You look really beautiful, may I say this? I'll say, okay, I give her less money because she looks so beautiful, and so she had an advantage in comparison with ugly people. What would you say when your boss say, here, tomorrow I have a new information for you. You are looking too beautiful, so you had an advantage, and so I have to give you less money.
I wish that were true. I wish I had an advantage right now, but I definitely don't feel like it gives me an advantage. So yeah, I guess when you put it that way, when you make it personal with people, yeah, I can see how that makes sense. But I mean, yes. This push to make things so about identity rather than merit, is this just part of socialism, the philosophy there?
Yes, of course, it's this new kind of socialism, and it's also racism, and it's also anti-Semitism. I heard what happened now in a lot of American university with this pro-Palestine rallies, and this was, in most cases, it was for Muslims, and it was far left extremists, and I'm very worried about it. We have it also here in Germany, that there's a kind of coalition between this identity politics or post-colonialism and how they call themselves with extremist Muslim people, and they go against Jewish people, for example. This is what happened 2 weeks ago here in Germany. There was a student at the university, and he was Jewish. And then there was another one. He was from Palestine Arab, and he punched him so hard. And then when he was at the bottom, he attacked him against his head, and he was seriously injured, only because he was Jewish. Can you imagine this? This is what happened in the darkest history of Germany. And this was also, at this time, the National Socialists. Hitler called his party the National Socialist Workers' Party. And this was also always a combination between anti-Semitism on the one hand and anti-capitalism on the other hand. This is very dangerous, what's happening right now.
And we're so grateful that there's someone like you that's done the research and can speak from experience and actually make these reality checks of what socialism has done to other countries and how capitalism, free market society has redeemed other countries from poverty. Just how close do you think that America is on going down a path of poverty if we keep going in this direction?
Yes, I think, I spoke about Venezuela before, and I remember last year I was in a conference in Miami, and there was a speaker, and she came from Venezuela, and she said, take it as a warning sign what happened in our country. You're in the United States, that's what she told. Because, Venezuela was a very successful country. It was a democracy with freedom of press, freedom of speech, and prosperity. And now it took not such a long time to make it a very poor country. And this can happen. Don't be so sure that this can't happen in the United States. Or hear the sad story of Argentina. Argentina was 100 years ago one of the leading, most prosperous countries in the world. A lot of people don't know it, but it was as rich as the United States 100 years ago. And then they started with this all the big government regulation, socialism, and now you see 40% of the people there live in extreme poverty, and they have a double-digit inflation rate since decades. And so this can happen in every country. We shouldn't be too sure. You know, from my background, what happened in Germany, we were one of the leading countries with a established democracy and capitalism. But then in the 30s, came the National Socialists and what they did. So a lot of things can happen in history what you don't think before. What people think, oh no, not in my country. We are different. But this is a big mistake. It can happen everywhere. When it happened in Venezuela, when it happened in Germany, why shouldn't it happen in the United States?
Absolutely. Well, wow, this has been such an enlightening interview. I thank you so much for doing the research and trying to educate others. And we need to share this information. We need to wake up our friends, because, like you said, we might think, oh, not in my country, but it can happen anywhere. And you're sounding the alarm, and we need to tell other people. So thank you so much. And we're going to make sure that we link to your book and get it in a lot of hands for other people to spread the word. All right. When we return, on this topic, he's giving all these examples of how to warn people, and what's happened in other countries. And so there was a speaker at CPAC who was warning how to kill globalism in America, like he has been able to kill globalism in El Salvador, that I think is worth a listen on this topic. We'll play some of that when we return from this quick break.
Now move.